Oh, Tim, what are you doing to me? It's January. You're not supposed to release new Macs this month, but you have, and, well, what a piece of news this is. Now, I could sit here and ramble on and moan about the fact that we weren't expecting new Macs until March-ish and all that stuff, but you don't care about that. All you care about is my opinion on the M2 Pro, the M2 Macs, the new MacBook Pros, and the new Mac Mini. So let's just get straight into it. I've only spent about an hour going through this stuff. It was only announced about 2 hours ago, so bear with me on this one, guys. There'll be loads of content on this. If you don't want to miss my reviews of the new Mac Mini and the new MacBook Pros, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell. But let's get into what Apple has announced today. So the first thing is we have brand new M2 Pro and M2 Max chips. And these have more powerful CPUs and more powerful GPUs. So starting with the M2 Pro, you can have that in either 10 or 12 core CPU configurations and either 16 or 19 core GPU configurations. Both of those are a step up from the M1 Pro. You can then have either 16 or 32 gigabytes of unified memory. That's the same memory option as the M1 Pro, but then Apple gave us some insight into the performance of this new M2 Pro chip. So for animation rendering, you can expect up to 20% faster performance than the M1 Pro and 80% faster than Intel Macs. Xcode compiling, 25% faster than the M1 Pro and 2.5 times faster than the Intel Mac. And then if you're into Photoshop image processing, you can expect up to 40% faster performance than the M1 Pro and 80% faster performance than the Intel version. We also have the M2 Max, which has a 12-core CPU as standard and either 30 or 38 cores of GPU. That's a pretty hefty increase over the M1 Max that had a 32-core limit. And the M1 Max can have either 32, 64, or yes, 96 gigabytes of unified memory. It's also got 67 billion transistors, which is apparently 10 billion more than the M1 Max, and just like the M1 Max, it has 400 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth. But the key thing with this M2 Max is the GPU, which has a larger cache than the M1 Max, which apparently gives you 30% faster GPU performance. There's also a new media engine with twice the ProRes support, and that improves media playback and transcoding. And they gave us a statistic for this as well, so if you are a DaVinci Resolve user, you can expect 30% faster color grading performance over the M1 Max. I think it's fair to say that just like the M1 Max, the M2 Max is all about graphics performance. And the only thing to bear in mind is that these new M2 Pro and M2 Max chips are built on 5nm technology. And if you listen to Max Tech, those guys have been absolutely pining for a 3nm process M2 chip. I don't know enough about that stuff to comment on it properly, but I do know that 3nm is better than 5nm. And Max Tech are worried. And Vadim, who was on this channel last year, he's even tweeted today to say that he expects massive thermal throttling on the 14-inch M2 Max high-end spec laptop. We shall see. These new M2 Pro and M2 Max chips are going into the new MacBook Pros, which have also been launched today. Now, they don't look any different, so if you were expecting a design change or something different in that regard, that's not the case. That doesn't matter because the current MacBook Pros are fantastic. I've not had time to check if these are price rises or not in the UK. If you're in the UK, perhaps you can let us know in the comments. I just haven't had time to do the research properly yet, guys. And obviously, when Apple launches new Macs, they just remove the old ones from the store. So finding the previous prices, I need some time to do that. But basically the 14-inch M2 MacBook Pro starts at £2,149 in the UK for the M2 Pro version. And then the 16-inch MacBook Pro starts at £2,699. And beyond those new chips, there are some other improvements. You now get up to 22 hours of battery life, which is the longest ever on a MacBook Pro. They both also support Wi-Fi 6E, which is apparently twice as fast as the previous generation. They also support up to 8K displays now, although I need to look into how many of those you can attach. You can still attach up to 4 external displays to the M2 Max, which is the same as the M1 Max version, but this 8K display thing, I need to dig into that a bit more. And as before, if you've got endless amounts of money, you can spec both of these laptops with up to 8 terabytes of internal storage. I don't know who does that, but yeah. that's still the option. However, the M2 Pro chip is going into another Mac. We've got a new Mac Mini. It's not a redesign, unfortunately, so there's no new colours, there's no smaller, thinner design. It's the exact, well, it looks like the exact same Mac Mini we've had for years, which is a bit of a disappointment. I really hope they've fixed the Bluetooth issues. We shall see on that front. So the M2 version of the new Mac Mini starts at $649 in the UK, and the M2 Pro version starts at $1399. While editing, I've just done some more research on that pricing, and the $649 starting price for the M2 Mac Mini is cheaper than before, so it's even more affordable. Thumbs up, Tim. The Mac Mini also gets Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3. Again, let's hope that solves the Bluetooth problems. And the standard M2 version of the Mac Mini is basically a M2 MacBook Air in a tiny, convenient desktop box. What we don't know is whether or not the base spec version with the 256GB SSD will have that NAND chip issue that we've seen with the M2 MacBook Air. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll leave a link above to a video I made about this recently, but that could be worrisome. We'll see what they do with that. But I think the big news with this new Mac Mini is the M2 Pro. And that's because the M2 Pro version of the Mac Mini is basically a M2 MacBook Pro in a tiny, convenient desktop box. And starting at $1399 and having the exact same upgradable option, so you can go right up to 32GB of unified memory, is just amazing for that computer. And during Apple's promo video for this, they were clearly angling this new Mac Mini at small creative studios and basically small businesses that don't have huge budgets, but that need the power to create very creative things and do, development work, and places that don't need Mac studios. But this does put the Mac Studio in a bit of a weird place. It'll be interesting to see what they do with that computer. Will we see an M2 Pro, M2 Max, M2 Ultra version of the Mac Studio soon? Because when the Mac Pro arrives, we suddenly have quite a confusing Mac lineup. So I'm delighted about this new Mac Mini. I think the spec options and the pricing are fantastic, but we do seem to be heading perilously towards a confusing Mac lineup. But I know what you want to know now is, what have I ordered? I've basically gone like for like, kind of, with the stuff that I've ordered. So starting with the MacBook Pro, I've ordered a 14-inch M2 Max MacBook Pro. I've maxed the M2 Max chip to the 38-core GPU version, I've increased the unified memory to 32GB, and I've gone for the 2TB SSD. And that spec choice mirrors what I went for with the M1 Max version of the 16-inch MacBook Pro that I've been using as my main production machine. Now obviously the main difference is the fact that I've gone for the 14-inch version this time over the 16-inch, and that's because I want to downgrade the size. The 16-inch MacBook Pro is just a bit too big for me these days. I'm doing lots of traveling and I like the idea of having the 14-inch version. I've also ordered an M2 Mac Mini. I've gone for the standard M2 chip, not the M2 Pro, but I've increased the unified memory to 16GB and I've gone for the 512GB SSD. And again, that pretty much mirrors what I went for with the M1 version of the Mac Mini. So the idea with both of these new Macs that I've ordered is that I want to see how far we've come between the M1 and the M2 generation. I can't wait to see how those two machines perform, so make sure you subscribe and hit that bell not to miss those videos. I do have to wait until the 3rd of February to get these Macs, which is a bit annoying, but there's no rush. We can chill out with this, we can take our time, can't we? And in the meantime, if you want to see what I'm doing with the Mac Mini in this studio, because I've got a very interesting project planned for it, which will now, from the sounds of it, take place with that new M2 Mac Mini, keep watching for a link to that video.